Hey everybody, Ed Homewood, Old Guy Hi-Fi channel. I hope everyone's doing well today. Today should be a really interesting video. We're going to be looking at the linear tube audio Z40 integrated amplifier, and it uses some really kind of cool modern technology based on some kind of cool older technology. Sit back, relax, we're going to talk about this really unique amplifier. Well, the linear tube audio Z40 is a really interesting tube-based integrated amplifier that uses no output transformers, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. The unit, as you see it here, with the optional Ray Select EL34 tubes and the moving coil, moving magnet phono preamp built in, has a retail price of $9,220. Now, linear tube audio is a direct-to-consumer reseller, so check on their website. There are a lot of options available for tubes and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the front, we're going to take a look at the back, I'm going to open it up, we're going to look inside, and then we're going to come back and talk about how it sounds. So give me a couple minutes to reconfigure. Well, here we are looking at the front panel, the linear tube audio Z40 integrated amplifier. We've got our power switch, infrared sensor, volume control, indicator lights for our sources, whether it's phono, tape, or one of the five. Now, the fifth source is the balanced. 1 through 4 is the single-ended. And then input that toggles you through the various inputs. Now, one thing you'll notice is the volume number changes on the display. You can have a unique volume to start up on each one of those inputs. Tape monitor loop would indicate the tape light. Up, down, and menu select and back. Now the menu allows you to do things like choose home theater bypass, set the brightness of the display, how long the display is on, whether you're subwoofer, stereo, or mono. And those kinds of things. I'm not going to go through it because it's hard to read. And then back just takes you back to whatever your volume control is. Now on the headphone jack, there is a low output and a high output, and then a selector so you can just go from headphones. And again, the volume control is whatever it was set at last, and then back to speakers, and then again, it changes to whatever that last setting was on the source selected. Headphone amp works really, really well. Now, it does come with a beautiful full-featured metal remote control. In the past, people complained because it used an Apple remote, but LTA did come up with their own beautiful new remote control. So that's the front panel of the Z40. Let's spin it around and look at the back. Well, here we are looking at the back panel of the LTA Z40 integrated. AC power socket, master power switch, tape monitor in and out. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 single-ended sources. Input 5 is a balanced input. Notice that for a tube amplifier, there are no 4 ohm or 8 ohm taps. You just plug your speakers in normal and it can handle a speaker load down to 2 ohms. Subwoofer output, it can be mono or stereo, and then we have our moving coil, moving magnet input and ground. So that's looking at the back panel of the LTA Z40 integrated amplifier. Well, here we are looking at the inside of the linear tube audio Z40 integrated amplifier, and I will confess, I don't have very much experience with output transformerless tube amplifiers, and this is the absolute first time I've ever seen a David Baring ZOTL designed amplifier from the inside. So I'm just going to be able to cover the basics, and I'll talk a little bit about the technology and kind of the philosophy behind output transformerless and ZOTL amplifiers. So one of the things you'll notice is along the back row there are 10 22,000 microfarad capacitors for a total of 220,000 microfarads. Each of the other large capacitors you'll see on the board are 22,000 microfarad. The particular unit I have here uses the optional Ray Select EL34 output tubes, really beautiful. These are the preamp tubes. I don't know what they are as far as, I think these are EC83s, and the other two I'm not sure what they are. I'll look them up, and if I can find them, I'll put them in the caption. But one of the things you'll notice is there is no large transformers anywhere. So the idea behind it is tube amplifiers, we kind of associate this kind of warm, tubey, kind of round sound to them. And that's actually the output transformers that are producing that characteristic. It's actually a type of distortion. Now, it's very inoffensive because it's even order harmonic distortion and things like that. But it is a distortion, and therefore detail in the music can be lost in there. And it's obviously, tube amplifiers have a huge following, and I love them. They're very wonderful to listen to. But the difference is in clarity and accuracy and things like that. So a tube amplifier isn't the most accurate amplifier, and we know you can see the measurements and they're not. So a ZOTL amplifier like this does not have that thicker, warm tone. They still have the liquidity of tubes and the holographic sound stage of tubes, but without, you know, that transformer adding distortion. So it's been, you know, a long-standing goal to eliminate output transformers in tube amplifiers, and it started back in the day with a gentleman named Julius Futterman. And he patented the original output transformerless designs, I think, in the 50s. David Baring's taken it another step by using a different circuit design to, you know, obviously eliminate. So tube amplifiers are voltage devices, not current. And obviously they have very high output impedances, which don't match the very low impedance of a speaker, 8 ohm, 4 ohm, whatever. Most solid state amplifiers have, you know, like 1 ohm output impedance. So the transformers are designed to protect the amplifier from the low impedance load of the speaker. Well, the way David Baring has designed this amplifier, it handles those low impedance loads, actually all the way down to 2 ohm speaker loads, without the output transformer, through some really unique circuit design. And it's kind of interesting. The funny thing is they don't stress the tubes very much. Most of the time, EL34 tubes in most amplifiers, especially ones that are powerful like this at 51 watts, the tubes maybe last at 2,000 hours or thereabouts. With this design, the tubes last anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 hours. So it's really interesting. And obviously, all of the capacitance and all of the other circuitry in here contributes to the amplifier's ability to look at a low impedance load and not cause problems and not need transformers to drive those loads. So again, we're going to do a little bit, you know, as I said in the intro, a little bit of a deeper dive into this, and I've covered some of that already. But again, I have zero familiarity with this kind of an amplifier design, so I really couldn't pick out much for you as far as like what part of the circuit does what. So let's button it up. Let's go back in the studio, and I'll talk about how it performed and the music I used. Well, when we discuss the sound of traditional transformer-based tube amplifiers, we always refer to them as being warm and tubey and having this kind of glow to them. The funny thing is that warm tubey sound doesn't come from the tubes themselves. It's actually the transformers, the output transformers. And it's actually a form of distortion. And it's because output transformers have all kinds of problems with magnetic fields, winding inductance. You have hysteresis in the core of the transformer when they saturate. All of those things contribute to a distortion that is very friendly. It's kind of even order harmonic, so it doesn't sound bad to us. You know, when you overdrive a tube amplifier, it clips very gently, but again, it's that distortion. So if you can eliminate the distortion that the transformer puts into the circuit or creates, then you get a cleaner, more resolute sound. And that's where the ZOTL technology from David Baring comes in. So he developed this, he worked on it for like 20 years. And actually, I think he designed and patented it in 1996, called ZOTL. And it's a zero hysteresis output transformerless. That's what ZOTL stands for. And Linear Tube Audio licenses the David Baring ZOTL design from them. So the ZOTL design eliminates the need for large, heavy output transformers, typically used obviously in tube amplifiers. Instead, it uses high-frequency switching to couple the tubes directly to the speaker load. This approach offers a couple of different advantages. One is very linear performance. ZOTL amplifiers maintain real good sonic purity. The sonic purity of the tubes, the stuff we like, that three-dimensional holographic soundstage stuff, while minimizing distortion and colorations that were created initially by the transformers. It also extends the tube life. Typically, OTL amplifiers, first of all, a traditional Futterman design OTL amplifier consumes a ton of power from the wall. It creates a ton of heat, and they eat tubes for breakfast. Also, too, they can be very unstable depending on the load they're presented. So they can oscillate and they can create all kinds of problems. With the ZOTL design, it actually extends the tube life. Let's say a typical EL34 in an OTL, in a Futterman design output transformerless amplifier, probably 1,000 or 2,000 hours you'd get out of the tube. With the David Baring ZOTL design, we're talking 10 to 20,000 hours out of the tube sets. So that really makes a big difference and obviously reduces the cost of ownership. Also, ZOTL designs are far more energy efficient compared to traditional tube amplifiers. They don't consume as much power from the wall because they don't waste as much power with heat. They can also be a rather compact design. Now, this is a rather large, physically large amplifier, but not as large as, I've seen some Futterman design, and I have a very limited experience with those designs, but I've seen Futterman design monoblock amplifiers that are bigger than this. So it's really unique. So the idea is there's less distortion because we don't have the output transformers. The distortion, as I mentioned, covers up details in music. So this can produce a far wider range of frequencies, cleaner, and you get the holographic 3D soundstage of a tube amplifier, but without the problem of that warm tubey sound masking it, masking the finer details in the music. Now, most tube amplifiers struggle to get down to 20 hertz. These are actually rated and designed to go down to 8 hertz in the low frequency range. So that means much more natural bass. And obviously it makes it a much more pleasant sounding amplifier than a tube amplifier that gets, that loses its damping factor. That's the other thing, is tubes have very low damping factor. This does have an improved damping factor compared to a traditional transformer-based tube amplifier. So let's talk about how I tested it. Well, how did I test it? I tested it as I normally do most amplifiers. I've had the unit since just, I think, the end of November. So I've listened to it exclusively for several weeks, several hours on end. And I did feed it signals from turntable using the internal phono preamp, and I used the TAC TN5BB that I have in for review. I also fed it digital signals, and I used, for DACs, I used the Live Harmony, and I used the ZOTL Daisy with the upgraded Sparkos op amps, the linear power supply, and I did use on both the Live Harmony and on the Daisy, the SMSL P0100 Pro DDC reclocker, and I did that so I could take a USB signal from the PC running Artivana and go I2S into the Live Harmony and go optical into the ZOTL Daisy. So I did listen to it deep into the night, and a lot of different stuff on it. And I found some really good recordings, so let's talk about those. The first album I want to talk about is this album from Jenna Mamiya and Rolf Sturm called Wicked. Now, I'm probably mispronouncing her name, so I'm just going to call her Jenna. Now, this was originally a 2000 release. It was re-released as an audiophile edition in 2021, and that's the link here. Jenna and Rolf perform together quite frequently. They have a number of albums out. And in this particular case, it's kind of a real interesting mix of pop and jazz and some folk influences in it. Jenna's voice is very soulful. Rolf's guitar playing he's a very talented guitar player. And it's an interesting recording. It was originally recorded at Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, California. I do need to slow down. I apologize for that. And Fantasy Studios is known for being a real top-tier studio. As I mentioned, the album kind of blends together jazz with elements of folk and pop. It is kind of got a sophisticated sound to it. It's really easy to listen to. Jenna's voice is very expressive and can shift between jazz classics and modern tunes with ease. Mr. Sturm's guitar playing is very good, excellent, and it complements her voice really wonderfully. And it's he creates these beautiful melodies. They're not real flashy, but they really enhance the mood and the kind of that really interesting kind of sophisticated sound that they have. So the album features both original tunes and cover tunes. Now, it's named Wicked after the Chris Isaak song Wicked Game, which is the first track on the album. But they also cover songs like I Love a Rainy Night, which was an Eddie Rabbitt big hit back in the day. I Want You to Want Me from Cheap Trick. Hello, It's Me from Todd Rundgren. And Carole King, I think it is Bitter with the Sweet. Is the Carole King song. If not, I'll put it down here. And then my favorite standout track on this is actually Tin Man, which was a song by the group America. So it's really interesting how well the two of them work together. Obviously, they've performed together for many, many years. They've got a great chemistry. It feels very intimate, very personal. It kind of almost, and the way it's recorded is very well recorded. You can kind of feel like you're in the room with them, and it's One online critic described it as you're listening in on a beautiful conversation, and I think that's kind of interesting. So for fans of jazz and contemporary acoustic music, I think you're going to really find it interesting. Wicked has got some really great songs on it, some great performances. It's really just a ton of fun. It's very charming and very creative. Really, really highly recommended. So again, Wicked from Jenna Mamina and Rolf Sturm. Well, the next album I'm going to recommend is an amazing collaboration between John Scofield and Pat Metheny. It's called I Can See Your House From Here. Both these guys are absolutely legendary jazz guitarists. Both have long histories in jazz guitar. This is a real gem. It was released in 1994, and it was released on Blue Note, which is really interesting. And it was recorded at the Power Station in New York City. And the Power Station is an amazing studio. I have some experience with it on the pro music side of things. It is a very unique album, and it brings together these two legendary guitarists. They each have their own very distinctive style, and it is a real seamless mix of compositions. There's a lot of improvisation, and there's some great chemistry that goes on. And again, the two of them are very different in sound. Scofield's sound tends to be a much more edgy, bluesy vibe. Metheny tends to be much more smooth, melodic. If you're familiar with either one, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. In this album, and with these songs, they cover a lot of ground. They move through straight ahead jazz, blues, even some fusion cuts. Remember, John Scofield was in Miles Davis's band for a long time as guitarist. So it's got this really kind of excellent mix of sophistication and easygoing accessibility and a lot of rich textures. And I think a lot of that comes from Metheny's guitar sound. And it really kind of pulls you in. I think what really makes it so special is how the two of them work together. There's not one guy trying to outdo the other. They definitely have a lot of respect for one another, and there's a lot of collaborative sort of engagement in the songs. Again, Scofield's kind of raw and angular, and Metheny's kind of warm and lyrical, but they complement each other beautifully, and the handoff between the two is seamless. And they trade solos. It's the way they weave it together, the two sounds, it's really very magic. I think it's amazing. So the album did really well. It was a hit for critics. I think it is such a unique collaboration. Again, two totally different guitarists, completely different styles. It's a really fantastic collaboration. I think it showcases the best of both of them. And again, in '96, they're really both very much in their peak prime period. They still are, I think. They still perform really great. But you know what? Whether you're into jazz guitar music or not, I think it's just great music. It's definitely worth a listen. It's just wonderful, very well recorded, very, very well recorded. Beautiful instrument recording. There's, I think all of the instruments are placed properly. Again, the imaging is created in the studio, but really dynamic, well recorded. For me, the standout track is No Matter What. It's kind of a groovy, bluesy number that Scofield kind of dominates the playing in. It's just wonderful. I've always loved John Scofield. So again, John Scofield, Pat Metheny, the album I Can See Your House From Here, highly recommended. Well, the next recording is this recording from Seiji Ozawa and the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and it is Bela Bartok's The Miraculous Mandarin Suite. Now, the Miraculous Mandarin was a ballet, and this suite is kind of a more condensed, shorter version, much more concert-friendly format. In and of itself, it's a much longer piece. Now, this recording was done in 1977. It was recorded at Boston Symphony Hall, which has great acoustics. It is a very dynamic and dramatic interpretation of really one of Bartok's most provocative, scandalous pieces. The Miraculous Mandarin Suite is a ballet, as I said, and it involves themes of seduction and violence and survival, and again, very provocative. The score is very much a whirlwind of intense rhythms and very sharp dissonances, bold orchestral colors. It really kind of showcases Bartok's mastery of modern techniques, but it combines it with tons of Hungarian folk influences, which of course is his background. So Ozawa, who is known for having a great deal of energy, he brings that signature energy to the and precision, because he's a very, very precise conductor, emphasizing its dramatic contrasts and obviously rhythmic drive of this piece. The Boston Symphony Orchestra under his baton just captures the raw energy, the eerie atmosphere of lots of parts of the suite. The haunting opening, obviously, the explosive climaxes, the orchestra is in full voice. It's just wonderful. This recording has been praised for its clarity, its intensity, its attention to detail, and it is often noted how it captures both the suite's ferocity and its moments of haunting beauty. It is really a compelling listen. And it's one of those pieces I go back to frequently just because it is not what you normally expect from quote unquote ballet classical music. It's really, really interesting. So again, Seiji Ozawa, Boston Symphony Orchestra, Bela Bartok's The Miraculous Mandarin. Well, let's talk about how this thing sounds. So how did the linear tube audio Z40 perform? Well, it performed quite well, and it's a remarkable piece, and doesn't have a tube sound, and it doesn't have a solid state sound. It's kind of got its own unique character, and I'm going to try to describe it. I hope I can get it across, because it is not what you would expect, I think, from a tube amplifier. It doesn't have that warmth that you normally expect from EL34s, and it doesn't have, I don't know how to describe it. It's very unique. Let me talk about how it goes through the frequency range. So down on the low bass, transformer-based tube amplifiers have very little bass control, very little damping. This does much better than that. The only other tube amplifier with the transformers on it that I've heard that has a similar bass damping control is the Black Ice F22 with the Fosgate Odyssey circuit. They're very similar, although I think this does just a little bit better in bass damping. So low bass, really low bass, which a lot of times for me is synthesizer generated. There's not a lot of detail in that stuff anyways, it's kind of a sound. It's not as well focused in the low bass as a solid state amp might be. And again, I think that's damping factor at that point. But down to probably, if we start thinking about bass, from 60, 70 hertz on up, oh my gosh, is it amazing. So that bass range, mid bass, the whole mid bass range, lower mid range, there is a warmth to it, but not a tubey warmth. It's got its own character. The vocals sound so natural. The guitars, because I've got 3 guitarists in this that I recommended in these albums, their guitar tones are perfect. They're beautiful. It is full sounding. It's lush sounding without sounding unfocused, like sometimes you get with tube amps. Just beautiful, clean sound, but definitely a warm tone to it. And again, the vocals, Jenna's vocals were amazing. The guitar tone was amazing. Kick drums had good attack. Maybe not as fast as solid state, but it never sounded laggy or slow. But it was so rewarding and beautiful. And then that imaging in that area was just amazing. And I'll talk about that more when I talk about imaging. So a lot of warmth in that kind of upper bass through the mid bass into the lower mid-range area, right where you want it, right where vocals are, right where guitars are, right where a lot of the piano playing center of the keyboard is. As we move up, the warmth kind of dissipates gently into just what is a very clean signal. So mid-range and upper mid-range into the treble response, super clean, very accurate, very neutral, not sterile, but not warm, but just well-defined. So that gave me good cues for imaging, spatial cues, room size cues, for good soundstage and imaging, and I'll talk about that again. So again, good, clean, very neutral mid-range, very well detailed, very well appointed with sound. Tones were excellent, but the star of the show is, that kind of the lower mid-range into the upper bass range. Gosh, right where almost everything occurs anyway. Just beautiful, just gorgeous sound. As far as imaging, because of that, as that kind of that warmth, you get that holographic tube soundstage that we all love, but without the loss of detail. It is focused, not laser focused, and I don't really care. I'm not a laser focused, especially in orchestral stuff. I just want to generally know where the instruments are placed, but I want to have that sense of space that you get. So even in the warmth of the mid bass and the mid-range, lower mid-range, you get a great sense of space. But as we move up and as that warmth kind of fades away into a good, clean signal, imaging cues are just wonderful. Sense of room space is just wonderful. Now, on the Boston Symphony Orchestra recording, I've been to Symphony Hall in Boston, and I've heard the BSO play Under the Baton of Lauren Mizell. So I have a personal recollection of the sense of that space, and this did an excellent job of rendering it in a way that reminded me exactly of being there. It was very, very good, very deep, very wide. Good height, good focus, center image, good instrument placement. Not laser sharp, but I don't really care about that. I'm just looking for general placement, and it did an excellent job. The other thing it did really well is in the Bartók piece, there are some really quiet passages, and you got a good sense of, and I think I've mentioned this before, and I guess I gravitate toward recordings like this. You got a real sense that there were people on the stage, and there were actually people performing. It's not just a note, and not just an instrument. There's actually some human interaction there. And this did a really good job of rendering that. One of the best I've heard. Very, very good at that. So great imaging, great cues, great transients. Were the transients as fast as a solid state? No, but they were much faster than normally you'd get in a tube amplifier, I think. But very good, very quick, very dynamic, maybe a bit limited ultimately on the top end, but the decays were beautiful. You know, the decays hung in the air beautifully like we want from tube amplifiers, but without that kind of loss of focus. They were much better delineated, those decays. So really wonderful job. I just think it did an outstanding job, and it was different than solid state, different than tube. It's unique and very engaging and very pleasant, and highly recommended. And I'll be honest with you, at $9,220 retail price for the upgraded version I've got here, I think it's well worth it. The build quality is outstanding. The design from Fern and Roby is absolutely outstanding. It's a beautiful piece to look at. It's a beautiful piece to interact with. It's got a beautiful all-metal remote control. They did away with that Apple remote, thank goodness. I think it's very compelling. It is obviously very intricate and very complex design, but it performs beautifully, and I don't think from a service standpoint it's going to be any issue at all. Really, really wonderful piece. And just I enjoyed my time with it. Well, hopefully you enjoyed your time with me, and you'd be willing to give me a like and a subscribe. About 60% of the folks that watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I would encourage you and ask you, please, consider subscribing. The more subscribers I get, the more manufacturers are willing to provide me with really cool equipment. I mean, $9,220 amplifier, that, you know, on a small channel like mine, linear tube audio took a flyer, but thank goodness they did. And as my subscriber base grows, then more and more manufacturers are willing to send me really cool stuff to play with, and I can make videos and hopefully entertain you guys and hopefully teach you something. I will probably put my notes and my research on the OTL amplifier and ZOTL amplifier details in the community post if anybody wants to do a deeper dive. I didn't want to totally nerd out on this because I would have lost a lot of folks, even though I find it fascinating, and I know some of you do. So there'll be some resources in the community page. Anyway, again, please please subscribe. If you wish to support the channel, there's a thank you button at the bottom of the video window if you're watching on your portable device or computer. There will be a membership link in the pinned description and in the pinned comment, and in the video description. There will be a link to Linear Tube Audio's website. I have no affiliation with them, but there's some more good information there, and obviously some good product offerings that they have. There will be affiliate links in the video description. You guys understand how that works. I will have links to the 3 albums I talked about in this video. There will also be links to playlists. There is a link to the community post playlist. Please check it out. There's some wonderful music there. Please comment. Are you interested in tube amplifiers? Do you have any experience with Futterman designed tube amplifiers? Do you have any experience with a standard transformer tube amplifier? Are you thinking about tubes? Those kinds of things. Please keep in mind, as the channel's growing, it's getting harder and harder for me to respond to every single comment personally. I do read them all, and if I have a moment, I will respond. Please try to limit your comments to maybe a paragraph at the most, because I get some very, very long ones, and it's very hard for me to do that. Also, too, unless you've seen me review it, I can't tell you how one product's going to work with another. So please go back to playlists. Please go back in my video history to see if I've actually reviewed the product. I do appreciate you guys asking. I do appreciate the fact that you respect my opinion. I really do. I'm flattered by that. But please keep in mind, too, that if I haven't reviewed it, I can't render an opinion. So that's enough of that stuff. So please like, subscribe, comment, follow me on Instagram if you want to. My name is Ed Homewood. This is the Old Guy Hi-Fi channel, and it's now your obligation to yourself to sit back and relax and listen to some really beautiful music like Jenna Mamiya and Rolf Sturm's. That's a lovely album. Maybe on a really good tube amplifier, maybe one without transformers. And enjoy the balance of your day and relax. Thank you so very much for your time. I am grateful for it. I hope you have a wonderful day.